Hey everyone, Duke here, and welcome to my updated guide for learning about mods. There's currently 362 mods in the game, and we're not going to go over every single one, but this video is hopefully going to give you some tips and tricks to kind of easily get yourself into using mods and some ideas for maybe some builds and such. We're going to start off with artifact mods. Starting from this season in the Witch Queen, they actually allow you to unlock all 25 artifact mods now, which is pretty awesome for attempting to try some of these out and such. And a lot of these mods tend to be very, very strong mods, so you definitely want to look into these every season. Going over a couple big ones for Season of the Risen, starting with Lucent Finisher. This allows you to get heavy from any Lucent Hive Bear or Champion as long as you finish it. And this is actually better than something like Aeons, where it only gives your teammates heavy. This gives everyone on your team heavy, so that's really, really nice. It does cost 6 and only goes in the class item mod slot, but if you are fighting any amount of champions, things like GMs, or again, if there's any champions or light bearers in the activity you're doing, this is a hugely, hugely useful mod. One more big mod for this season is the Thermoshock Plating, which basically combines Solar Resist and Arc Resist into one. And not only that, but there's a nice little boost you can go with, is if your chest piece is currently Void, you can still run Void Resist, and then also run Arc and Solar Combo Resist, because normally you can only run the resist that your chest piece is, right? So mine is Void, so I can only run Void. But here, I'm able to run Void and Arc and Solar all on the same chest piece, plus if you happen to have a Artifice armor piece, then you can run it even in this final slot and potentially run something like Concussive Dampener or Sniper Resist or whatever you may want. There's a lot of combinations you can go with, but this is a really, really, really strong mod, especially for only 2 energy cost. There's quite a few other strong mods in this season's artifact as well, but as this changes every couple of months and may not be relevant by the time you're watching this video, the main other thing you want to look at in the artifact are all of your champion mods. These are going to be the main way you deal with champions for that season, other than exotics like Divinity or Arbalist. But these are definitely something you want to kind of get used to at the start of any given season, kind of understand which types of weapons you're going to be able to use for unstoppables, barriers, and overloads. And again, they change every season, kind of make you switch up what you're using, but very important to look into here. Next, we're going to quickly talk about stats and stat mods. As you can see here, I have 100 recovery and 100 discipline, and without the use of stat mods, this would not be something that would be doable for me. In the first slot for any armor piece, you have the general armor mod slot, which houses these stat mods, and you actually have the ability to either do a plus 10 mod or plus 5 mod of any given stat. The plus 10 mods obviously cost more energy, but give you 10 stat to whatever you're looking for, and the plus 5s give only 5 to that stat, but do cost less energy if you're using other mods. Do note that in Destiny, there are actually tiers for your stats, so the difference between, let's say, tier 6 at 60 resilience and tier 6 at if I had 69 resilience would be exactly the same. So you actually need to get to that next quote-unquote 0 number for it to matter. Also, any stats above 100 do not help your character, so if you are trying to hit 100 in certain stats, try not to go over by too much. Next, we're going to go over the combat style armor mod socket mods, because these can go anywhere from your helmet all the way down to your class items. The one thing you do have to note is these will be only on specific affinities, so for certain mods will only be available for Arc, some will only be available for Solar, some will be available for Void, and some will be available for Stasis, so keep that in mind. There are 3 types of mods that go here, and they are the Charge with Light mods, the Warmind Cell mods, and the Elemental Well mods. All these mods basically have a combat effectiveness bonus to them, hence why they're called combat style mods. They kind of show you the way that you're going to play in combat, and are very, very strong if used effectively. As you can see here, there's actually 71 total mods in this slot. We're not going to go over all of them, but we will go over quite a few that I consider very, very strong and very effective in many different scenarios. Do note that all of these mods are only available for purchase from Ada in the Tower, and these are in a daily rotating reset. It's a really bad system, honestly, no doubt about it, but make sure if you are looking for some of these mods, you are checking Ada daily, buying any mods that you are missing, and eventually, hopefully you'll get most or if not all of these mods available for your use. We're going to start off with the Charge with Light mods that I feel like are worth mentioning. The first 2 we're going to talk about are kind of similar to the stat mods we just mentioned, the first one being Powerful Friends. This gives you a plus 20 mobility bonus as long as you are using another Arc mod in this armor piece or an additional Arc Charge with Light mod somewhere in your build. That 20 mobility is especially useful on hunters, but anywhere you need more mobility, super nice to have this one. Additionally, you get the bonus of whenever you become charged with light, any nearby allies will also become charged with light if they are not already. And in any content where you are using charged with light builds and maybe have teammates that are also doing so, this is going to be a nice little bonus as well. Next we have a very similar mod called Radiant Light, which instead of giving you 20 mobility, will give you 20 strength, again, as long as you have another arc mod somewhere on the same armor piece, or an additional charged with light arc piece somewhere in your build. Again, you could potentially do Radiant Light on one piece and Powerful Friends on another, and that would satisfy this, and you'd get the 20 strength and the 20 mobility. This one also has actually a very strong effect though, where casting your super causes nearby allies to become charged with light. Again, in any team-based content, a lot of times you are pretty near your teammates, and if you pop out your super when you're near your teammates, you're going to allow your teammates to become charged with light, which is very nice. Now, what does being charged with light give you? There's many effects you can get from charged with light, but the two main ones I'm going to talk about here are going to be high energy fire and firepower. High energy fire allows you to gain a bonus to your weapon damage whenever you are charged with light. Note that if you kill something, you lose a stack of charged with light, so you basically need to have a way to kind of continuously get your charged with light stacks if you're going to use this in a constantly killing and constantly maneuvering scenario. However, when paired with Radiant Light and potentially a boss DPS scenario, it can be a very nice combination because you have one person running Radiant Light as they pop their super, gives everyone charged with light, and then if everyone is running high energy fire, they now have that charged with light stack, and in a boss DPS scenario, again, you're mostly focused on just shooting the boss, you're not really killing adds. So you're going to keep that charged with light stack, or at least one charged with light stack, to make sure that you have the buff from high energy fire, and you're not losing it because you're not killing anything. Firepower is another way to use your charged with light stacks, this time regaining a portion of your grenade energy whenever you use your grenade, which again will consume a stack of charged with light. Do note that you can actually run multiple copies of this mod to get even more grenade energy back when you use it, so that is also something to keep in mind. Trying to run multiple of these mods, like for example if you try to run high energy fire and firepower at the same time, is usually going to be pretty difficult because you're constantly consuming those stacks of charged with light, and can be pretty hard to keep up those stacks. One way to try to keep those stacks up is using the mod Stacks on Stacks, which gives you an extra stack of charged with light whenever you gain a stack. Now if you're looking to get those stacks in the first place, Elemental Charge is a great mod to use, as this will allow you to become charged with light by picking up an Elemental Well, and if that Elemental Well happens to be the same as your subclass element, you will instead gain 2 stacks of charged with light. We haven't talked about Elemental Wells yet in this video, but Elemental Wells are definitely extremely strong these days, especially with a lot of the Void builds out there, so keep this in mind, and we'll get to a little bit more on this in just a bit. Elemental Charge kind of replaced Taking Charge for me because of the nerf to Orbs of Power, and basically the way it used to work is if you masterworked your weapons and got multi-kills, you'd make orbs. And now you have to use a mod in your helmet slot, which we will talk about in a bit. There's just a lot less orbs on the field. So for me, I'm not really using Taking Charge anymore, I'm using Elemental Charge, but Taking Charge is an option. And the mod that used to be the strongest mod in the game, but actually got nerfed twice recently, is Protective Light. Not only did it get nerfed because of Taking Charge getting nerfed and the orb generation getting nerfed, now you have less ability to get stacks of charge with light by picking up orbs, but also this used to give you a 50% damage resistance, and now only gives 10%. Big difference, big difference there. There is another mod that can give some pretty good damage resist now though, which is Striking Light, which this allows you to gain damage resistance, which that is 25% against combatants while sprinting. So again, this is a little bit different. You have to be moving, you have to be sprinting to be getting that resistance, but you're constantly, in a lot of scenarios, moving around to be able to get this. It's going to be a little bit more specific than something like Protective Light was. You have to be moving. If you're kind of hunkered down, kind of sitting back somewhere, you're not getting any of this resistance. But this is something to keep in mind. Again, do note that this only will give you that effect if you are running another Charged with Light arc mod, or an arc mod specifically in the armor piece that you're running this mod in. And one other defensive mod that will also allow us to transition into Elemental Wells is Well of Tenacity, which this will give you that old 50% damage resistance that Protective Light used to, but only when you pick up a Void Elemental Well. It's a strong mod, and if you're making a lot of Void Elemental Wells, it is definitely worth using if you need that extra defense. but I personally still feel like Protective Light was significantly stronger than this mod ever will be, just due to the fact that it always procced when your health turned red and when you were about to die, aka when you actually needed it, and this is just whenever you pick up a Void Well. So like, that could be after you killed everything, that could be, you know, you're fighting like one enemy and you don't really need that resistance, and you know, when you really need it and there's a bunch of enemies that you're fighting, you may not have a Void Well around. So it's good, it's very solid, but it is not quite to the level that Protective Light once was. Continuing with Elemental Wells though, and talking about how to make some of these Elemental Wells, we are starting with Reaping Wellmaker, which, after activating your class ability, your next weapon blow on a combatant will spawn a Void Elemental Well. This is a very consistent, very easy to use Wellmaker, as it is right in the name, as all you need to do is use your class ability, kill something, you make a Void Elemental Well. The downside is it only makes Void Wells, so if you're kind of looking for more of a Solar or Arc type build, not as helpful, but this season is all about Void, and a lot of mods go with Void Elemental Wells, so this is a very, very solid option, especially on Hunter, and if you're running high mobility, as your cooldown of your class ability will be quite low compared to either Titans or Warlocks, but even Titans and Warlocks definitely can very much use this mod. One of, if not my favorite Elemental Well mods is the Elemental Ordnance mod, which this allows for you to create a Elemental Well that matches your subclass energy type just by getting a grenade kill. That's it. So super duper strong, can be used on any class, on any subclass. Again, goes really, really well with Void, goes, for me personally, really, really well with Void Warlock, and just kind of having that uptime of Void grenades, and using it with something like Nezarec Sin, or something like Controverse Holds, works super duper well with both of those, so a lot of options for that mod. Another nice mod that can again go with Void, but actually can go with any type of subclass, is Elemental Armaments, which this one allows for combatant weapon final blows with a damage type that matches your subclass element have an escalating chance to spawn an Elemental Well. Basically, if you're running the same subclass and weapon type, so Void and Void, Arc and Arc, you can make Elemental Wells just by killing things. For me, a lot of times that'll look something like running Void Warlock with something like Gnawing Hunger, but again, you could run Solar with Ogma, or Arc with something like Forbearance with Chain Reaction. Again, there's a lot of options here, but you do need to pair one of your weapons, at least one of your weapons, with your subclass to make this possible. A nice little easy cheap mod, if you just have like a little extra space or something, is Elemental Light. This costs only 1 energy, so fits in super nicely pretty much anywhere, and defeating a combatant with your super spawns an Elemental Well that matches your subclass energy type. So, super simple there. Pop your super, get a kill, get an Elemental Well back. Obviously not as much uptime on this one, but it is not bad if you just have space and only 1 energy, or you're already using some of these other mods. And the last mod I'm going to talk about in terms of creating Elemental Wells is Supreme Wellmaker. This allows for casting your super to spawn 3 Stasis Elemental Wells near you. This can be any super type, it doesn't have to be a Stasis super, it will just create 3 Stasis Elemental Wells, no matter the super. Now I might be going a bit out of order with this explanation, but I feel like it fits here. In case you don't know what Elemental Wells do, basically picking them up grants energy to your ability with the lowest current energy, but if you pick up an Elemental Well whose element matches your subclass damage type, which we were talking about multiple times here, you will get energy to all of your abilities. And not only that, but there's quite a few mods that you can actually, basically picking up an Elemental Well mod, cause an effect from them, which we are now going to get into. We did talk about Well of Tenacity earlier, which is one of these types of mods, but another really strong one is Font of Might. This is actually available in the Artifact mods this season, and it only costs 1 instead of 4, but into future seasons it will still be available here, and basically picking up an Elemental Well that matches your subclass energy type, again, a matching kind of idea, will grant a bonus to weapon damage of that same elemental type. A really popular way to take advantage of this is to have someone use Supreme Wellmaker, like we just talked about, to create those 3 Stasis Elemental Wells, and then use something like Reed's Regret. This will allow the Reed's Regret, as long as you yourself are on a Stasis subclass, to get that bonus damage as you are using it, as long as you also pick up those Elemental Wells that were created by your other teammates, and as long as you are running Font of Might. There are definitely other ways to take advantage of Font of Might though, as you could be running a Solar subclass with something like Sleeper, or even just something like running a Void subclass and having your Void build as it normally is, and something like Gnawing Hunger. Obviously it's a little bit less important on something like a primary than a heavy and something like a DPS phase, but it still benefits you. Another artifact mod we didn't talk about earlier but fits in perfectly here is Volatile Flow. Again, going with the whole Void Season type of idea here, picking up a Void Elemental Well will grant your Void weapons volatile rounds. And this is insane. It just explodes everything. It's really good. It's really, really good. Again, this mod goes super great with something like Gnawing Hunger, or the super popular weapon from this season, Funnel Web. The final Elemental Well mod I want to talk about today is Elemental Time Dilation. As you may have noticed, there's quite a few mods that, when picking up an Elemental Well, give you some sort of benefit for some amount of time. Basically, what Elemental Time Dilation will do will increase that time. The final type of combat style mods are the Warmind cell mods. These have been around for a while and got nerfed really, really hard a while back, and really aren't used too much anymore, but they definitely still have some use. I'm only going to talk about 2 mods from this, but there are definitely some other options you can use. The first one is Global Reach, which basically allows the Warmind cells that you create to affect and damage targets at greater distances. So if you're doing any sort of Warmind cell build, this will allow all those Warmind cells to affect things at a greater range. The other mod I want to talk about is Wrath of Rasputin. Normally you need to use a 7 Seraph or a Kelos weapon to create Warmind cells. This mod allows that to no longer be the case. For Wrath of Rasputin, all you need to do is have solar splash damage final blows to give you that chance to create a Warmind cell. It's not guaranteed, you'll usually take a couple, but it will create Warmind cells. A really good option that I was actually experimenting a bit with Warmind cells earlier this season is Explosive Personality, the solar waveframe grenade launcher, as this will create a lot of solar kills with, again, splash damage, and will allow you to create a lot of Warmind cells. And you can even pair that with my personal favorite weapon of all time, Galahorn, as this will also create solar splash damage kills and give you even 2 weapons that can create Warmind cells within the same build. And not only that, but even your subclass can create Warmind cells if you're running solar. If you get a grenade kill, those are also considered solar splash damage and can give you Warmind cells as well. Keep these Warmind cells in mind. They're still there and they're still strong. Next, we're going to talk about armor piece specific mods. Basically, there are a big suite of mods that are only available on any specific armor piece, whether that be helmet, gloves, chest, boots, or class items. These mods are always available in the 2nd and 3rd slots in any armor piece, and again, can only go on that specific armor piece. Keep in mind, just like I mentioned earlier with the combat style mods, some of these mods will also only be available on certain affinities, so make sure you're checking out if it's Void, or Arc, or Solar, or Stasis, before you're like, oh, where's this mod, or how do I put it on? Again, something like Dynamo, for example, you can see that the energy cost has the Void symbol next to it and is purple. So this tells you that this is only available on your Void helmets. Starting with helmets, we have 3 main types of mods to talk about. We have Siphon mods, Ammo Finders, and Targeting mods. The Siphon mods are basically the old masterworked orbs that I mentioned earlier, where this allows you to create orbs when getting multi-kills. Do know that these are very separated now and kind of a little wonky to use, as you have the 1 energy harmonic siphon, which only gives you orbs if you get kills with your weapons that are matching your subclass type. You have the kinetic siphon, which gives you orbs on kinetic weapon kills. And then you have the elemental siphons, which are only for the specific Void or whichever weapons you're using type of final blows to create orbs of power. Again, you can technically use harmonic siphon rather than void siphon if you're using a void subclass, for example, as that only costs 1 and will have that same effect because it's void on void. But you could technically, if you're using an arc subclass, let's say, you could still run void siphon to allow your void weapons to create orbs on multi-final blows. Next we have ammo finders. These are for every single weapon type you can possibly imagine, and basically give you an increased chance of finding that ammo type when you have that type of weapon equipped. These are a staple to me in pretty much all of my PvE builds, as they definitely help in terms of getting more ammo, especially for things like your heavy, so something like a rocket launcher ammo finder is paramount if you're using a rocket launcher. And do note that getting kills with primary ammo weapons actually give you an even higher chance to find ammo for these ammo finders. And lastly, we have the targeting mods, which improve your target acquisition, accuracy, and ADS for, again, all different types of weapons. These are definitely mods I would personally never, ever, ever recommend in PvE. They're definitely quite strong for PvP type purposes, but if you're more of a PvE player, which is definitely where I am focused, it is not something I'd ever recommend. You have the ammo finders, definitely more useful, and again, even the Siphon mods can be useful as well, and that's even thinking after the fact of having the combat style mods that you would potentially want, and or the stat mods in your general armor slot. Next we have the arm mods, which the main focus here, again for PvE at least, is going to be your champion mods. This is the only place you can put your champion mods, and if you're doing any champion-specific activity, you're going to need these mods. So you're basically pretty much always at least one of these mod slots being taken by one of these mods. If you're doing PvP or non-champion focused PvE content though, you also have reloader mods, as well as dexterity mods. Again, for PvE, I would never really recommend any of the dexterity mods, but the reloader mods can definitely be useful for both PvE and PvP, as it increases the reload speed of whatever weapon choice that you make for your mod slot here. Do note that these also can stack, and so if you have both mod slots open, you can potentially run 2 of the same reloader mod to get even bigger effects. One other mod I want to quickly talk about here is the Bolstering Detonation mod, as this will grant you class ability energy whenever you cause damage with grenades, which this will be useful for the Bomber mod that we will talk about in a little bit. Next we have the Chest Piece mods, which houses the Resistance mods, the Reserve mods, as well as the Unflinching mods. Just like with helmets and arms, I would say the Unflinching mods are, again, not super useful for PvE purposes, but probably the only useful one for PvP purposes. For PvE, my main focus is definitely the Resistance mods. Again, we talked about Thermoshock Plating earlier and how strong that can be, but any of these Resistance mods, things like Concussive Dampener, especially if there's any types of AoE effects, these are huge. These will give you 25% damage resistance from whatever type of resistance you're using, and if you run 2 of the same one, you can actually get 40% damage resistance. For anywhere there's a rally banner, I also actually keep a chest piece that has double reserves of whatever heavy ammo type I may be using, which lately is a lot of times linear fusion rifle, and what you can do is you can put on your double linear fusion rifle reserves, rally to a flag, as that will then give you your ammo based on the reserves that you had, and then switch back to your original chest piece that will keep your reserves as the double reserve piece had, but will also give you now, when you're actually fighting and in the encounter, the resistance that your new chest piece has. So this will basically allow you to have the double reserve mod benefits while also still having the double or even triple resistances if you have the Artifice mod slot that the resistance mods can bring you. For legs, we have 2 main armor mods, the holster mods, as well as the scavenger mods. Scavenger is super duper strong for PvP, and you should pretty much always be using a scavenger mod for whatever you are using your special weapon. So if you're using like a shotgun, for example, definitely want a shotgun scavenger, or if you're using a fusion, definitely want a fusion scavenger. These are also really, really good in PvE as well. Definitely still recommend them there. Also do note that scavengers no longer stack. They used to, they no longer do. Do not try to run 2 of the same scavenger. You can indeed though run 2 different scavenger mods, for example a fusion scavenger and a rocket scavenger, and that will give you both benefits, so keep that in mind as well. Holster mods are not overly great, to be honest, but the one that I do use from time to time is Fusion Rifle Holster. All of these holster mods basically give you a small amount of your total magazine back every 5 seconds or so, and something like the Fusion Rifle Holster only gives 1 back every single 5-second interval, right? And so what I like to use that with, though, is something like Reservoir Burst on Null Composure or any of the other fusions that can roll Reservoir Burst. And what that'll allow you to do is take your one shot, immediately put it away, and use your primary, use your heavy, use whatever, and when you pull it back out, as long as you wait at least that 5-second window, it's refilled. It gives you that Reservoir Burst proc again. And it's basically like a kind of mini version of auto-loading holster. Again, it only works 1 shot at a time. Technically, if you wait long enough, like let's say I used like 3 shots of Null Composure and then put it away, if I waited about 15 seconds, it would reload all 3 of those shots. It's not only 1 shot per put away of the gun and then pulling it back out, but it does take that multi-interval to reload all of those shots. Also note that the holster mods are based on a percentage of your mag, so it's not 1 bullet for something like a machine gun. A machine gun, it can be, again, it's a percentage, it can be a couple bullets. I still wouldn't really recommend pretty much ever using the holster mods other than a situation similar to this, but if you have nothing else to put there for some reason, it can be helpful. It's like a mini version of auto-loading holster, which is a great mod. And finally, we have the class item mods. These tend to be a lot of the artifact mods, as you can see here, and we went over some of these earlier. Again, Lucent Finisher is great. Overload Grenade, which we have not mentioned, another great option. Devouring Depths if you are using Void and Devour, super duper strong. A lot of good mods here. However, a mod I want to talk about outside of those artifact mods, as I mentioned earlier, is Bomber. Again, going with some of these grenade-focused builds, whether it be Void, or a lot of times I'll run this on my Stasis Warlock especially. Just by using your class ability, you can get a good like 10 to 15, 20% chunk of your grenade back just by using your class ability. And again, if you're running high recovery on a Warlock, or high mobility on a Hunter, or high resilience on a Titan, you're going to have a pretty low class ability cooldown. Do know that this mod actually can stack as well, so you can run double Bomber, and actually I do tend to do that sometimes if I don't have any other mods to put here. Like, honestly, I'm not using the general armor mod slot quite often just because of Lucent Finisher, and if you do have Artifice armor for your class item and it doesn't have any rolls, so all you need to do is get it once, so it's one of the best pieces to get for Artifice armor, especially also because of the fact that it has so many artifact mods. But you can do something like Lucent Finisher in the final slot that costs 6, and then you still have the ability to run double Bomber here to get your full 10 energy. Or as you saw a minute ago, I could even run one Bomber and then still run something like Elemental Charge or Volatile Flow or Font of Might. You have a lot of options. You have a lot of options here, and Artifice Armor, again, super duper helpful for the class item especially, but even if you don't have Artifice Armor, again, you can just move this to the middle slot here, and then you could still run Elemental Charge or Volatile Flow, etc, etc, etc. And that's all for my ultimate guide to learning about mods, Witch Queen Edition. If you have any other questions or concerns or thoughts on any other mods that I didn't mention, or questions on mods that maybe I did, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And if you guys have any builds that maybe you like to talk about that I did not mention, also definitely throw those in the comments below so people can learn and have other ideas on what to use or potentially what might be strong. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.